Welcome to The Courageous Choice, a podcast about what it really takes to lead at the edge of change. Because here's the truth, strategy isn't enough anymore. The world of work is moving faster than ever, and the leaders who stand out aren't the ones with all the answers. They're the ones willing to make bold decisions in moments of uncertainty. This podcast is about those moments, about those leaders, and because leadership today isn't about certainty, it's about courage. The courage to see differently, act decisively, and step forward anyway. I'm Jamie Jacobs. Welcome to this episode of The Courageous Choice. I'm super excited today to be partnering with Pedro Arellano of Wallaby, and we're going to have a great conversation about dual transformation. Welcome, Pedro.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It's my pleasure to be here.
I know about your background, but I'm hoping that you'll share with the audience some of your really interesting background and what led you to founding Wallaby.
Well, how much time do you have?
Yeah, that's the beginning part.
Right. My background is in technology and enterprise software. From a very young age, I became fascinated with computers and programming, and I ended up going into the data analytics space. I was fascinated by the idea of using information to understand how something works, in this case, how your business works and how to make decisions. So I spent my career at a mix of Silicon Valley startups all the way to large companies like Google and Salesforce. It was at Salesforce running the Tableau product division that I met my team. And I was there when I was working with a brilliant group of PhDs in November or October 2022, when ChatGPT came into the mainstream, I remember one of them said to me, "Pedro, this is miraculous." And that's when I knew that this is more than hype. There's something really substantial here that is going to completely disrupt not just the way we do business, but the way that we live in general. And I think almost 3 years on, we're seeing that that is true. So Wallaby is a technology strategy and implementation firm. We are essentially our client's AI transformation partner. Our background in the data analytics space allows us to offer a very different perspective outside of AI. AI gets all the attention and all the hype, and that's great. We love AI, but the reality is that it works like the iceberg picture, where the tip of the iceberg, what you see, is the AI piece, and there's all this work underneath the surface that is really data work. You've heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out.
100%.
That is very true. So success with AI really happens with that solid data foundation underneath, and that's something that we're very good at. So we offer all kinds of services, from advisory, strategy, roadmaps, all the way to custom application development.
Well, that's one of the reasons I was so excited that you agreed to become part of the gig talent ecosystem, is that deep credibility, right? And I know we see clients that have data in all different kind of disparate systems, and they're really looking for those solutions to unlock the future. This conversation really started from you sharing, the reason that clients are reaching out. They're obviously looking for ways to optimize their organizations, but it started down an interesting conversation around there's both the optimization and potential cost cutting, but there's also how do you unlock the possibilities of what comes forward, and that's where you introduced me to the idea of dual transformation. So maybe share a little bit about that.
Every single business leader right now feels this urgency around doing something with AI, even if they don't know quite what that means. You hear from a lot of executives that have that anxiety of being left behind or their business becoming irrelevant. It feels very strongly right now because things are just moving so quickly. The pace of change is unlike anything we've ever seen before. So the idea of business transformation is on every leader's mind. So what happens is that when 99% of people, when we think about transformation, we naturally sort of default to thinking about a very specific type of transformation, which is about efficiency. How do we make processes faster, better, cheaper? There's a lot of value there, but it's not the only kind of transformation. About 8 or 9 years ago, there was this book published called Dual Transformation from a trio of strategy consultants. This was before AI. The book is not focused on AI, but it describes how there are two types of transformation. The first one, let's call that type A, is the one that I just mentioned. It's about how do we optimize the existing processes. But there's a second one, which is not about efficiency. It's about innovation and growth. It's not about what's already existing. It's about the new. How do we create new capabilities, new offerings, new ways to service the customer? And it's very important to have those in mind and approach them simultaneously, because everybody is going to do transformation type A so much that it's just going to become table stakes. You need to do it because there is value in it, and it's going to help you keep pace, but it's not going to give you that market separation. The market separation is going to come from transformation type B, the growth, the innovation. And the companies that realize that are the ones that are going to become the leaders. 2 weeks ago, there was this global study that came out from PwC. They interviewed 12 or so 100 companies, and they have the data to substantiate what this book was saying 8 or 9 years ago. The leading companies are 3 times more likely to be implementing AI for innovation and growth, not just for efficiency. And that's really powerful.
So like you said, there's kind of the table stakes part of efficiency. So for these legacy organizations, they have to kind of do both, and they're dealing with existing constraints, whether it's financial, people, talent, time, whatever the constraints are. And then there's potentially these new companies coming up behind them that might be AI first. So how do you help people think through that in their prioritization?
It's challenging, certainly as a legacy company, but in a way, there's also a lot more opportunity. But I think the important thing to keep in mind is that you can't approach AI transformation purely as a technology project. And that's the risk, that these big companies are sort of used to thinking about these things as tools. So yeah, that is the CTO or the CIO's responsibility. Go evaluate this tool. And that's not really what this is. AI transformation is much more than technology. In fact, technology is the last piece. There is such an important people, culture, organizational component to it, process component to it, before you even get to the technology. So AI transformation cannot be viewed as a tool evaluation. It cannot be viewed as a technology project. It cannot be owned by an IT leader. It has to be jointly owned across the leadership team, because everybody from the COO to the CHRO have a role in AI transformation.
There's this exercise, if anybody's participated in like a futurist exercise, this idea of being able to like put down the constraints that are real, right, in your current organization, and think about what's possible. That's what we're being asked to do. And what I find is that if you walk into any leadership team, they're all going to be at different levels of understanding, acceptance, adoption themselves. And therefore their concept of what's possible is going to be huge in variation. And so there's this opportunity in what we're doing to really help them align both in the okay, we're going to let go of these things, then what's possible. And then, what advantages do they already have? Who are they as a culture and as an organization? How do they differentiate in the market? What strengths can they use today to actually build on? And then you can be really strategic about what you do and how you prioritize the AI investment and transform work.
The best thing that any business can be doing right now, and any professional can do right now, is become immersed in these technologies and in these tools. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what level in the organization you have. Every single person needs to become AI literate, because I said it today, we're going to reach a point where it's expected, in the same way that it's expected that you know how to use a computer or you know how to use email. And to your point, becoming AI literate, it leads to your brain thinking a different way about what's possible. And from a leadership perspective, that is very important. The story that the emergence of the electric motor for manufacturing. The electric motor existed for 3 decades before it became really widely adopted in manufacturing. Back when these manufacturing companies, the plants were still run by a single giant steam engine, and you had these tall vertical buildings with the steam engine and this network of pulleys and cables and belts running through the middle of the building, and all the machines were connected to the system. When the electric motor comes out, the default approach was, we're just going to replace the steam engine with this big electric motor, but nothing else around the operation changed. It wasn't until people started figuring out, we actually don't need one giant electric motor that's connected to everything. Each machine gets to have its own independent motor, which freed up the way of thinking.
That unlocked, right?
Exactly, because from that point on, they realized, then we don't need to have this tall vertical building anymore. We can have flat horizontal plants, and it introduced the concept of flow manufacturing and all these amazing efficiencies. So it took about 30 years for manufacturing to truly transform, because it wasn't until people realized it's not a technology change, It is an organizational change, everything around it. And as a leader, you need to be able to understand what are the potential for what are the possibilities for these tools so that you can come up with those types of ideas.
I believe that the only real limitation that we have as people is what we can imagine for ourselves or for our organizations. And so part of what's happening right now is how do you unlock that as a leader, obviously for yourself? How do you kind of create that shared vision of possibility at an executive level and then within the organization? I've heard some cool things that were one local company to us is doing Shark Tank. So they have their employees coming with examples and sharing what they're doing. And so they're just celebrating the experimentation, right? And that spurs other ideas, I'm sure you've had some aha moments with leaders. I was at one of your events and you had a CFO sharing an example that was pretty interesting. I don't know if that's one that you want to share.
So it's the CFO of an online estate planning business. And he was talking about how he used Claude Code to build a legal triage application where the AI knows how to route legal documents that they get to the right team. And it was so funny because somebody in the audience asked the CFO, "Oh, that's really impressive. So you must have a background in product development." And he just chuckled and said, "No, I'm an accountant." But that's such a great example of how things have changed. We're no longer in a world where leaders can afford to say, "Oh, that's not my job."
Right.
Even if it's not your function, you need to know how that's done. You need to become literate. And everybody because you also want to lead by example, so that everybody in the organization has that spirit of experimentation that you mentioned. Obviously, you want to do it in ways that are safe, responsible, that protect your business data, your information, your customers, all of that. But just imagine how your business can up-level if every single person is thinking about the possibilities and can create with AI. And again, we're no longer in a world where you need to have that deep technical software engineering expertise to build things. That world is ancient history. Anybody can take these tools now and build things with them. So it's not about the technical expertise. It's about making that mental adjustment that, oh, I don't need to be afraid of this technology.
Right.
I can actually be very proficient and build things of value with it.
I think it brings up so many things around identity as an individual. The way that we structure work obviously is shifting. I think we're in a time where just in general, our systems are lagging behind the pace of change, whether you could talk big macro systems, healthcare, education, and then within organizations. I think that there is a possibility as we start to re-engineer work, the words that we're using, finance department, HR department, IT, I don't think they really apply in the same way. I don't know that it benefits us to have any of those. We've all been working to mitigate silos and things like that for a long time. So this opens up that possibility. And one of the things we've been talking about is, people are fearful. In the last week, I think about 6 people have come up to me fearful about becoming irrelevant, right? And I was like, no, there's so much opportunity in front of us. And that deep expertise can be applied in new ways. You shared something about that you can code and we can do things, but the people who have been in that work more deeply in the last few years are going to be much more efficient and come up with even better and faster, right?
You're right. There's this fear that expertise will become irrelevant because now everybody can code, everybody can design. Software engineers are going to disappear. Graphic design is going to disappear. But we're learning that that's actually not true. In fact, the opposite is true. There's a book that I recommend to everybody in your audience called How to AI. It was written by Christopher Mims, who's an author, a technology author for the Wall Street Journal. A great read, very easy read, but he talks about all these learnings that we're seeing in the age of AI. And one of the most important ones is expertise becomes even more important in the age of AI because there is human judgment and taste and critical thinking that the AI doesn't necessarily have. And the example that I gave you is on my team, we have brilliant senior software engineers that have been building software for 15, 20 years. I'm a computer engineer by education, but I haven't touched code in over 10 years. You don't want me anywhere near code, right? So we're a great example because you could give us Claude. We use Claude Code for software engineering. You could give me Claude Code and you could give one of my senior software engineers Claude Code and ask us to perform the same task. I guarantee you that we'll do a significantly better job than me. even though we're using the same AI tool. So AI does not replace expertise. In fact, expertise makes the AI better.
Say that again.
AI does not replace expertise.
Yeah.
Expertise makes the AI better.
Okay, I believe it. I believe it. And I think that's the opportunity that we have, is helping people see that in themselves, really see where their wisdom can be applied, how it can be applied to optimize situations, to innovate, to do work differently, to add value, to partner. And I do think this hits at a really identity level for people, right? If I identified as an HR leader or a software engineer or whatever, an accountant that I went to school for, there's value in that, and there's deep value in that. And just because, you're not like doing a P&L manually doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to add strategic value to your business or your team.
What AI does is it gives us time back to focus our brain power on the highest value tasks and highest value problems. I use AI to automate a lot of my weekly marketing campaigns, but they're not 100% automated because I don't want anything going out to my audience that I haven't had a chance to review first. I want to make sure that it is what I want to say, that it sounds like me, but all that manual lift and hours that I might spend building that, I don't have to do that anymore, right?
Yeah.
And I think that sort of value that humans bring is very important to keep in mind as leaders are making decisions about how do we use this tool. We talked about the difference between using AI as a way to replace people versus using AI as a way to augment people. Yeah. I am on the side of augmenting people, of giving them time back. And late last year, we saw, coincidentally around the same time, such contrasting examples of this, where within 2 weeks there was these two interviews with the CEO of AWS and the CEO of Walmart, and they were talking about how they envision AI in their companies. And on the AWS side, very clearly there was a very intentional choice to use it to shrink the workforce, cost cutting, which is aligned with the Amazon ethos of ruthless efficiency, right? On the Walmart side, the CEO said, no, in fact, we think AI will help us grow the workforce because there will be new career paths and new roles and ways to make people better and more valuable. And that really resonated with me, because when you hear people saying, oh, AI is going to replace us, that's not true. It's not the technology, it's the leadership choices. It's the cultural, strategic choices that we make. So there's such an important people component to any discussion about AI transformation, going back to what we said earlier. People first, culture, organization, before you really get into the technology.
I think I'd almost call it a responsibility of leaders to bring people along on the journey. That doesn't mean that they're all going to stay in your organization. I think that organizations will right size, whatever that means, as they start to redefine what they're doing and how they do it. But we can be bringing people along on that journey so that when they go find their next opportunity, they're going to approach it with the skills to be effective and apply their gifts in different ways. And I mean, we're even doing it with our consultants, right? We're educating about AI and the transformation in the new world of work and what that looks like, deep, valuable expertise. It's just, how do you apply it in a new way and have the context to be able to help others navigate these big shifts?
It begins with making that mental adjustment to break that default thinking of, oh, that's not my job because it's technology. And it also needs to happen at the leadership level. So the question about who should own AI transformation. In some companies, it might be, oh, well, obviously the CIO or CTO should own it. But then you might have the CEO saying, no, this is operations, so I should own it. In fact, everybody should own a piece of it. CHROs should own it, because there's a very provocative conversation about how do we think about agents as employees, for example. And every single leader has a role to play. But it starts with feeling that ownership and not just pushing it away and saying, somebody else owns this, not me. Leaders can't afford to think that way anymore.
I'm going to wrap up this episode because I think you just queued up our next one that we're going to do around this cross-functional approach to transformation and what that really means today. Thank you all for listening, and we can't wait to see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to The Courageous Choice. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review to help get the word out about the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future conversations. If you'd like to know more about gig talent, please visit gigtalentagency.com or email us at podcast@gigtalentagency.com. See you in the next episode.